Okay.
Yep,
So if you're ready to go, we're going live.
I'm ready.
Hey, this is Warren Redlick and I'm here with Teague Egan. Mr. Egan is the CEO of EnergyX, a startup company hoping to extract lithium from South America, if not other places. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about that. Teague, just for background, tell us about EnergyX.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Warren. Happy to be here and talk to your audience and just have a fun conversation with you about Tesla and EnergyX and everything we're working on. So first of all, thanks for having me. Uh, like you said, I'm the CEO of EnergyX. I started the company a little under 3 years ago, and we're focused on the lithium supply chain. How we produce lithium that goes into the batteries for Teslas, pretty much, and eventually other electric vehicles, but mostly right now Teslas.
Okay, well, Tesla's the highest volume producer of electric vehicles, so it makes sense that you would focus on Tesla, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so one of the things that I was hoping to talk to you about, because you, by my standards, you're an expert on lithium, and at Battery Day, did you see the Battery Day presentation that Tesla put on?
I've probably watched it 5 times.
Okay, so at Battery Day, and I just watched this over again, Elon Musk and Drew Baglino talked about a plan to extract lithium from a lithium clay deposit somewhere in Nevada. So, using salt, I think Elon said it was table salt. I assume he means sodium chloride.
Yeah.
I've heard different takes on that. Some people say it's not possible, some people say it's not realistic. What are your general thoughts on that idea?
Um, so there are a lot of mixed opinions about it. From a technical standpoint, uh, what they described sounds very unlikely. Um, you know, they didn't really go into too much depth about it. It was a very short part of the presentation overall in Battery Day, but also it was a very even short part of that section of Battery Day. And I think it was the part they were talking about the cathodes. Uh, but let me just say this is that my overall take is that if I've ever learned one thing, it's do not doubt Elon Musk.
Yes.
So, as far-fetched as it might sound to, you know, the community of lithium experts, and I'm not even putting myself in uh, that group of lithium experts, as far-fetched as it might sound to them, Elon Musk at the end of the day backs up uh, what he says. So, they obviously um, have some sort of plan around how they look to do that, and the I obviously had a lot of conversations with my team about that. What that means for us if they are successful.
Yeah,
How
just to be clear, your business plan is to extract lithium from salt lakes in Bolivia and maybe in Argentina, Chile, and supply that lithium to the EV industry and Tesla. So if Tesla is able to produce its own lithium, that creates a problem for you and how you're going to generate business for your company, right?
Yes and no. So if it were just that simple, like a zero sum game, and what they were doing addressed the entire value chain of creating lithium, yes. However, what they are looking to do may be, or what we're developing, may actually be complementary to what they're doing and make what they're doing even more efficient in terms of the opex, the cost that it takes to produce lithium. So maybe they've stumbled across or invented an extraordinary new lithium production technology using table salt to extract it from clay. And what we've created could even lower the cost further uh, based on what they've done. So, that is one viable option. Um, but there's one gentleman that I actually spoke to about this that is much more technical than I am in terms of different separation and production, lithium production technologies. My team is very deep in extraction and recovery from brine. It's a water-based technology. There's a gentleman named Alex Grant from Jade Cove, which is kind of a consultancy firm, and he wrote a paper outlining what he thought Tesla's approach was, because obviously Tesla didn't go very much into depth about their approach, and it was a pretty good paper. I think that only time will tell if what they described in Battery Day comes to fruition. But whether it does or not, Tesla currently has all the lithium they need, and they have agreements with all the top producers already, and they have no worry about a shortage of lithium right now. If all the other auto manufacturers actually come through with their plans to electrify their fleet, and you have 20 more auto manufacturers making electric vehicles, which I hope is the case, then we need millions of tons of lithium, and there needs to be a lot more supply.
Okay, so for background for the audience, how it historically has lithium been extracted from the wherever it's extracted from? I think is it extracted from mines? I think you're talking about extracting it from salt flats. How is lithium typically extracted historically before your company and before Tesla?
So there's two ways. One is the hard rock mining, and spodumene kind of falls into that. And that's your typical like open pit, like somebody thinks about mining, and there's a big pit, and there's big machinery that's extracting it out of hard rock the same way copper is extracted, and then it goes through a chemical process where you leach the lithium out. So that's one way, the hard rock way, and there's huge mines in Australia that do this in the green bushes. And then the other way where we found there's a lot of lithium is in these salt flats. So an easy thing to think about, people relate like really salty lakes to the Great Salt Lake in Utah, or like the Dead Sea. It's very concentrated with salt. So where ocean water is like 3% salt, these salt concentrations are like 25 to 40% salt, right? And that salt, that makeup of salt is a bunch of different elements. So of course you have a lot of sodium, which, sodium and chloride, which is table salt. But then there's magnesium in there, there's calcium in there, there's potassium in there, there's boron, and then there's lithium. And when we found out, when I say we, like, the general industry found out that there was sufficient lithium salt in these brines, they started coming up with ways to extract it. And the way that it's been for the past 50 years is through these huge natural evaporation ponds. So they would pump the brine out, put it into these huge ponds, and the sun would evaporate the H2O out, and then the salts would precipitate out one by one. And that's how they make a lot of fertilizer, like potash, like chemical fertilizers and stuff like that. They precipitate out these salts from these really salty waters. And lithium is one of the salts that comes out towards the end.
Okay. So is there something about the makeup of I think one of the things you're saying that I didn't know before, and it's not like there's just a bunch of lithium. You dig a hole and there's a whole bunch of lithium in one spot. There's a whole bunch of
Yeah,
stuff together, and you have to get the lithium out of it.
exactly, exactly.
And the lithium that you're finding in salt lakes, there's different salts. There's magnesium salts. There's sodium salts, a variety of salts, and you have to extract the lithium salts from the other salts,
You
and
have to
whatever else is
separate.
there. What's that?
You have to separate the lithium, like you have to separate the lithium from all these other salts that it's mixed in with,
Right.
right?
And I think you said on one thing I was listening to that there might be, 1,000 parts per million of lithium in whatever you're looking at, or 1,500 parts, and maybe in some places it's less than that, in some places it's more than that. So,
Yeah, so 1,500 is like a very high. You're stoked if it's 1,500 parts per million.
okay, and then I think you described, maybe I missed it. Maybe I was checking something before. Maybe I missed it. I thought you were describing something where I saw where they use these lakes and they dry it out, and one of the salts goes to the bottom. They shift the water over to the next lake, and there's this process that takes 18 months to get lithium out. They lose a lot of the lithium in the process, right?
Yeah, that's how we currently produce lithium from salt brine
And
through this evaporation pond method.
your approach is to take the salt, run it across some membranes, and the first membrane takes out, say, magnesium, and the second membrane takes out, say, sodium, and a few things get taken out, and this is a lot quicker.
Well, yeah, obviously it's a lot quicker. You're applying a mechanical process to the extraction. But yeah, that's in short what our vision is. Yeah,
Okay.
use membranes as separation tactics rather than natural evaporation and precipitation.
Okay, but so it's number one, it's quicker, and number two, I think you said it takes up a lot less land, so maybe it uses less energy, so it's less expensive.
Yeah, so it takes up. I mean, so these pond systems in Chile are literally the size of Manhattan. I mean, they're huge. These are 15, 30 square mile systems.
Yeah.
Just massive. And so, obviously we're a lot smaller than that. In terms of the energy, the ponds are actually really efficient in energy because they just use the sun. It doesn't get cheaper than that. But they need a lot of people to operate these ponds. I mean, they're huge. But overall, when you throw all the economics in, our OpEx is significantly less than the ponds. So
Okay. So
and our CapEx is less too.
okay. Well, I mean, you have to use a lot less land, right? So
Yeah.
okay. So I'm going through I had a list of questions and we covered a lot of them. Do you
Okay.
have a sense of how many parts per million lithium would be in clay deposits?
I don't think it's really done like that, right? Because you measure parts per million in a liquid solution, right? So if you think about like an Evian water bottle, it's done by 1 liter,
Yeah.
right? So 1 liter is a million parts. The way that it's done with clay, I'm not actually really even sure how they measure it. I think they just measure it by weight, right?
Yeah.
So by milligram, and it's a lot different in clay because in brine, it's a lot more evenly dispersed, right? Like if you throw some salt in a water bottle, a 1 liter water bottle, and mix it around, it's all pretty evenly dispersed. When you're talking about clay, there can be a chunk of lithium here and some here, and then, but it's like a gold mine, right? If you strike gold, there's other gold around, and you can kind of test and see what your probable chances are. But there's certainly a lot more exploration risk with hard rock, and clay. You don't necessarily know how much lithium is there.
Okay. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit, and one of the more lighthearted moments I came up with was um, back in it was a couple of years ago. I guess there was some talk about some. I don't know how serious it was. There was some talk that there might be a coup in Bolivia, and Elon made some joke about, "We'll coup whoever we want to coup," and people were critical of him
Yeah.
for making that joke. Did you think that that joke had any impact? Did Bolivia care? Did anyone in Bolivia care that Elon
Uh,
made that joke?
I actually know for a fact that they do care,
Hmm.
and they uh, they did not see it as a joke, and I actually don't even know how much of a joke it was. You know, Elon obviously has um, a very unique sense of humor. So, but he uh, he says things that need to be taken seriously. You don't really know when he's kidding or when he's not when he makes a statement like that,
Okay,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like at the end of the day, Elon is a shark, and his company needs lithium. So we'll coup who we want to coup.
Okay, so they took it seriously. So,
They took it very, very
and
seriously. And you also have to understand that, you know, their political climate is a lot different than ours. Like they come from a very different environment in Bolivia where they've essentially been an authoritarian government. You know, that they obviously had a very democratic uh, election recently, but but the country had been run by the same person for 13 years who tried to change the laws and extend his term for an additional term. And it's just not the same down there. So, making a statement like that hits different pressure points and is a very sensitive subject.
okay, we've added some viewers while we've been talking. So, just a reminder to people: this is Teague Egan. He's the CEO of EnergyX, which is a startup company that has new technology that helps extract lithium from salt flats and maybe other places in particularly in Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile. I wanted to ask you again related to Tesla. I saw, and I don't have the picture. I don't think I can put the picture in quickly. I saw a picture of you with John. Is it John Goodenough or John Goodenough? How do you pronounce his name?
Yeah, it's John Goodenough.
Okay, so he is a battery. He's an older man now. He's a researcher at University of Texas, and my impression is the technology that you're using came from not just John Goodenough's lab, but I think there were 3 different universities that were working with this kind of technology, and you obtained a license. But how did you get to? And if the real hardcore Tesla fans know who John Goodenough is. They know he's critical to lithium-ion batteries. I think does he have a connection to Tesla as well? Hasn't he done some research for Tesla or his lab?
No, he does not have a connection to Tesla.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay. So, but for some reason, he's famous in the lithium-ion battery community. How did you get in touch with him? How did you first get to know him? How did that come about?
Yeah, so John Goodenough is a legend in the battery community. Well, he invented the lithium-ion battery. Him and there are 2 others that are also credited with the invention. Um, but and maybe I'm biased, but he was kind of like the main one. He came up with lithium cobalt oxide uh, cathodes, and so he won the Nobel Prize for that last year, and which obviously is an incredible accomplishment. But the way that I came in contact with him, so when I started EnergyX, we initially licensed a bunch of technology out of University of Texas, and it wasn't his lab. It was actually another professor at the University of Texas named Dr. Benny Freeman.
Right.
And Dr. Benny Freeman is pretty much the preeminent membrane expert in the United States, maybe even the world. Um, and he runs a center out of the University of Texas. It's a DOE funded center, Department of Energy funded center called Materials for Water and Energy Technologies. So MWET is the acronym. And they come up with all these very innovative technologies that have to do with energy and water and materials that can push those industries forward. So we licensed our membranes out of the University of Texas and this center, and they were partnered with two institutions in Australia on that. The University of Monash out of Melbourne and CSIRO, which is the Australian National Laboratory System. So a lot of people working on this technology, millions of dollars of funding that went into the fundamental research. We were able to license this technology for lithium extraction. And once we executed the license and I started to learn more about it and how these membranes were interacting with lithium and transporting lithium through them and separating them from the other ions in the brine, I said, what if we tested this membrane, like the core technology, in a battery as a solid electrolyte, because the membranes are obviously solid, right? And so that's when I sought out John Goodenough, because his lab is directly next to Dr. Freeman's lab at the University of Texas.
Right.
And what better, mind to work to help explore this potential option of using our lithium separation membranes as in the battery architecture than John Goodenough. So he was interested in the project, and we were able to help sponsor some research at his lab around this topic, and that's kind of how the whole relationship came together.
Okay, so let me skip over to I like bouncing around. I read that you own a Tesla Model S. Is that still true?
It is. It is.
And what year is it? And do you like it? What do you like most about it?
So the way that I got into all this, I actually invested in Tesla back in 2013 at $7 a share.
Is that pre-split or post-split?
That's post-split.
Okay.
So it was
35.
Yeah, well, it was $40 a share, so $8 a share post-split, okay. Right? And now it's what, like 600 and change or something
today.
like that.
It closed around 650 today.
650. Yeah. And I put a lot into it too. So I did well, but within the first few months, the stock doubled. It went from, at that time, 40 up to 80. So I sold some of my shares and bought a Model S 2013.
Okay.
And I still have it today. And my battery range has gone from 270 to about 215. So, I think that's past the 20%. So it's considered spent when it goes from 100, right, which would have been my 272, to about 80%. But I think the batteries are a lot better now. That's about, I think I have like 60,000 miles on it. So we need to get a little bit better battery technology, but I've had such an enjoyable experience with the Model S, and I would highly recommend it to everybody.
So do you still own stock in Tesla?
I do.
Okay. So that's turned out to be a good investment for you then.
It has.
Okay, $8 a share to 600 and something. That's a good number. I think it's going to go up a lot. What's your long-term perspective on Tesla as an investment? Where do you think the stock is going? I realize this is, just to be clear to everybody, this is not professional investment advice. This is just two guys talking about what we think about Tesla.
Yep.
In full disclosure, I own a lot of Tesla stock, and I think it's going up a lot.
So I think that the stock right now is way overvalued.
Okay.
I I think that the company itself is obviously one of the most innovative companies in the world, and the future is tremendously bright. I think that, but that's why the stock is so high, is because people believe in the future. I mean, when you actually look at the financials, it's trading at such an insane multiple that it's really hard to justify. But with that said, it just keeps going up. Like there's nobody that's better at bringing all the pieces of a business together than Elon Musk. He invents the best technology. He is the best marketer and promoter in the world. He has the best future timeline and plans. Like, so right where we're sitting at today, Tesla would be a phenomenal business, right? But we're coming out with the Tesla Semi and disrupting that whole business. We're coming out with the Tesla Roadster and disrupting that whole business. Soon all of the vehicles will have full self-driving, and he'll introduce the Tesla network and take out Uber and Lyft. That's another 100 billion market cap, right? He's thinking about solar roofs and power walls and power packs. I just installed a power wall at my house, and creating the whole circular renewable economy. Like those things, I think, will take a very long time to come to fruition. But when they do, it's a multi-trillion-dollar company. Today, looking at the financials, the stock's overvalued.
All right, let me ask you about that, though, because you're a battery guy. So at Battery Day, Elon and Drew Baglino said by 2030, we're going to be producing 3 terawatt hours of high nickel battery cells a year, and we're going to be buying other battery cells from LG Chem, Panasonic, CATL, whatever. Do you think that that's a reasonable goal to achieve 3 terawatt hours of batteries in 2030? Even if, let's say, it's off by a couple of years.
Look, I think that the brilliance behind Elon is that he makes his goals unreachable and gets 50% of the way there, and then sets new goals. And that's why he's successful. And, it's a very intricate perspective, because I heard somebody say that your happiness is just based on your expectations versus your reality. If your expectations are here and your reality is here, you're never going to be happy. But then again, the people that push society forward have to set their expectations. They have to set their dreams to something that nobody else thinks is accomplishable. And even if they get halfway there, then they set new expectations, but then they get to where their old expectations were. So whether he'll hit 3 terawatt hours by 2030, that's not really the point. Even if he gets to 1 terawatt hour by 2030 and then 3 terawatt hours by 2040, he's totally changed. He's totally changed the world, right? I think his goal to get to Mars was by 2030 or 20, something like that. If we get to Mars by 2060, he's accomplished his goal, right? Yep. So it doesn't really matter.
So the reason I asked you about because I have a video for people who are regular watchers of my channel, they've probably seen the video. I have a video where I take Tesla making 3 terawatt hours of high nickel batteries in 2030, and then assume they're going to use another 3 terawatt hours from other suppliers. And I project out, okay, if they're going to use 6 terawatt hours of batteries, how many products is that? How many cars is that? How many power walls is that? How many megapacks is that? And how many solar roofs or solar installations does that correlate to? And then what's the revenue? And the revenue ends up being a really big number. You end up with like 4 trillion in revenue in 2030. And then if you give a reasonable price to sales ratio, you start looking at a 40,000, I come up with a number of $40,000 share price if everything goes right. today's going from 650 today to 40,000 in 10 years. If I'm overly
Yeah.
optimistic and it's only $10,000 a share in 2030, and you backtrack, my next video, I'm working on this idea. If you say, well, what would a normal investing portfolio return? If you had a somewhat aggressive growth portfolio, you might hope for 10% a year, like a diversified portfolio. Well, if you do 1.1 to the 10th power, you get about 2.6, which means that in order to get to $10,000 in 2030, you'd need to invest $4,000 today, $3,800 today. So that would translate to a Tesla share today should be worth $3,800 if you project a 2030 share price of $10,000 a share. And that's where you sort of get in this problem of, well, how do you project a reasonable share price in 2030? And if you get to, let's say they produce 1 terawatt hour of batteries, right? And they buy 1 terawatt hour from suppliers, then you're at a third of my 40,000, you're over $10,000 a share. So
I think that first of all, I want to see that video. I'm very interested. I think that there's a lot of factors to consider when you're doing that, right? I don't know if this is the case, but I assume that you're doing that math based on what a terawatt hour today is worth, or what a kilowatt hour today is worth, right?
No, the math is if they make, let's make it really simple. You get 1 terawatt hour of batteries, you're going to make 20 million, let's say that's 20 million Model 3s. I'm making up the number. I'm not sure that 20 million is the right number. A Model 3 sells for $40,000. That's how I did the model. Multiply them. And I actually did, how many semis, how many Model S's, Model 3s, the Roadster, the compact that they announced. The Model S, Model X, and Roadster don't really matter because they're such small volume. The semi actually matters a little. And you get power walls, and you figure for every 3 or 4 power walls, you get a roof or a solar installation. And you just add up those numbers and you come up and how many megapacks. But in order to do 6 terawatt hours of batteries, you have to produce an awful lot of cars, and you have to produce an awful lot of grid storage. So, and then you just sort of figure out what's that worth. And I think I came up with something like, I had some number like $700 a kilowatt hour was the revenue, or maybe it was I forget the number off the top of my head. But you project it out and you come up with, if you just think about it, wow, 6 terawatt hours is a really large number of batteries, right? And at 100 kilowatt hours per vehicle, which it might be 50 kilowatt hours for the compact robotaxi. How many vehicles does that produce? And you come up with a really big number. So I'm sorry, I didn't want to drag you into talking about Tesla all the time. I wanted to get back to EnergyX because that's your thing. So
I could talk about Tesla for hours.
But if we achieve the 20 terawatt hours of demand for battery cells, that translates to EnergyX needing to produce an awful lot of lithium. So you said something about millions of tons of lithium. So where are you now? Because last I saw you were working on establishing like pilot production using these membranes. And at some point you were hoping to get 2022 or 2023, you're hoping to get to volume production. Where are you now? Where are you producing? Did you make any progress in Bolivia? Because I thought you were saying there were some sort of issues getting the government to go along. So where are you now?
Yeah, so we recognized a very important problem in that these big lithium producers, and really any big mining company, is slow to move, and they've spent a lot of money on their existing infrastructure, right? So we took a step back and we figured out how to make our piece of the puzzle a complementary solution to what they already had. There would be less risk for them, lower capex, and could still accomplish the same thing. Once we figured that out, we've been able to sign agreements, testing agreements or LOIs, with 4 of the top 10 lithium producers in the world, and 1 major oil and gas company that's looking to extract lithium from their produced water, as well as talking to several others that are either top lithium producers or major energy companies looking to do the same thing. Next year, in 2021, we look to have between 2 and 4 pilots in the field. And the typical testing time is about 6 months. If you successfully test a pilot in the field for 6 months, you can take the next step up. Depending on what the market is calling for, we could either go to a demonstration plant that is anywhere between 10 and 50 times the size, or we could go straight to a commercial plant.
So wait, so where would the pilot operations be?
On site.
I mean,
On
Argentina,
site, yeah.
Chile, Bolivia, where are they?
So we're talking to producers from all of those places. So we would have one in the U.S. here with a producer, and then hopefully a handful down in South America in those countries.
Okay. And, Bolivia, when you were talking about them before, they have like a really, really high density, I guess, or high parts per million count of lithium in the salt lake, but there are political issues with getting the opportunity to produce in Bolivia. Are you making any progress with Bolivia and being able to operate there?
So they actually have a low parts per million of lithium in their brine. And it's kind of getting dark in here. Let me turn on some lights
better,
here. Yeah. So Bolivia is a unique situation because they need our technology more than anybody. Let me just quickly tell you the difference between Bolivia Lithium and Chile Lithium. So both those countries are in a territory known as the Lithium Triangle. Right. It's kind of southern Bolivia and then northern Chile, northern Argentina. The reason it has such high lithium concentration is hundreds of millions of years of volcanic formations. The water falls onto the Andes mountain range, which is the second biggest in the world, and it finds its way down to the Pacific Ocean. Along the way, the water traps with it minerals from rocks and has created this huge area that's very high in lithium concentration. However, different areas have different lithium concentrations. So Chile, which is closer to the Pacific, has about 1,500 parts per million of lithium, 8 to 1,500. And then Bolivia, which is closer and higher in elevation, has about 300 to 800 parts per million of lithium. However, the key significant differences between those two, other than just the lithium concentration, is the ratio of lithium to magnesium.
Oh, right.
Which is very important because lithium likes to co-precipitate with magnesium. And if it does co-precipitate as a 2-salt ion, then you can't use it because it's not pure. You need 99.9% lithium to use in batteries, right?
I cheated and I watched some of your YouTube videos before. So to make it short, it's harder to extract the lithium if there's a lot of magnesium in there.
Right.
And there's less magnesium in Bolivia than there is in Chile.
There's more magnesium in Bolivia.
More magnesium in Bolivia. Okay.
Right. So it's harder. So the ratio of lithium to magnesium is about 1 to 25 in Bolivia. Okay. So if you say there's 300 parts per million of lithium, there's 3 times 25, which is what, like
7,500?
6,000, 7,500? Yeah. There's 7,500 parts per million of magnesium.
Okay.
Right. So it's a lot harder to use the natural evaporation ponds because you're not using any sort of mechanical separation. If there's 7,500 magnesiums, the chances that a lot of those 300 lithiums come out is pretty high, right? And then you have very low recovery rates.
Right.
And that's the reason that Bolivia has spent $500 million over the past 12 years trying to produce lithium and hasn't produced any commercial lithium.
Okay.
Right.
So go ahead.
So the other big difference between Bolivia and Chile is that in Atacama, you have less than half an inch of rainfall per year. In Bolivia, in Uyuni, you have 5 inches of rainfall. And while that might not seem like very much, it's 10 times more than Atacama. And when you're trying to evaporate water out and precipitate salt, when it rains, that's obviously bad. So that's why Bolivia has not. That's why Bolivia needs our mechanical separation technology. They literally cannot produce lithium without it. Now, as far as what's going on there politically, as I mentioned, they just had very successful democratic elections and elected their former Minister of Finance, who is a very smart gentleman, and I'm actually confident in his vision for lithium in Bolivia. You know, lithium's like kind of a national treasure there, but he just appointed a very smart Minister of Energy, who we met with while we were down there, and you know, I think that you're going to see a big change in Bolivia, and they've already established that they want to open up the industry for international partners to come help them. The reason that they haven't been successful is because they were trying to do it. Well, two reasons. One, they were trying to do it all themselves, and then two, they were trying to go. You know, they have lithium. They're trying to be electric vehicle manufacturers, right? They're trying to do the whole value chain themselves, extract the lithium, produce the final lithium components like lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide, produce the cathodes, put the cathodes into batteries, put the batteries into packs, put the packs into cars. First, let's just produce the lithium, right?
Yeah.
Let's do one thing great. And I think that the new administration realizes that, and that you'll see a different Bolivia in 2021 and in the future.
Okay, now I want to bounce around again. Your company's name is EnergyX. You're an Elon Musk fan. I think it's Energy Exploration, right?
Yeah.
So is EnergyX in any way derived from SpaceX, the name?
100%.
Okay, I figured that. Okay, so one of the topics that I think is, I'm going to bounce back now to batteries. One of the topics that I think is really, it's not talked about enough is at Battery Day, Elon and Drew laid out high nickel batteries, nickel manganese batteries, and lithium iron phosphate batteries. And I feel like no one talks about lithium iron phosphate. I think lithium iron phosphate is actually going to be the dominant battery chemistry in that 2030 scenario. That grid storage is going to be predominant lithium iron. So for those who aren't familiar with this, the nickel-based chemistries have better energy density. You can create more battery storage, more battery capacity in a smaller space and a lighter material with nickel-based chemistries. Iron phosphate chemistries take up more volume. They're bigger. They end up with bigger batteries, and they weigh more for the amount of capacity they have. But iron phosphate batteries have a monstrously huge advantage. They cost a lot less. That iron costs less than nickel and phosphate. Iron and phosphate are borderline free compared to the cost of nickel and manganese and whatever the other components are, and cobalt. Well, they're trying to get away from cobalt, but
they are.
The question I had for you about this was, I'm going to call you the lithium guy. I realize you're more than a lithium guy, but you're sort of like, that's what you're focused on. My impression is that the reason iron phosphate batteries have less capacity is because the bookshelf that they talked about in Battery Day, the structure of an iron phosphate cell can't hold as much lithium as the nickel-based chemistries. So
right.
Do you see, what's your perspective on the roles of lithium iron phosphate cells, nickel manganese, nickel cobalt aluminum, nickel manganese cobalt cells, and then this futuristic high nickel cells that hopefully Tesla will develop? How does that interact with lithium? That's kind of, man, that question might be a little unclear, but do the best you can with it.
Yeah, look, I think that I'm not sure if Elon pointed this out in Battery Day, but when you take a step back and just think about the fact that he did a Battery Day is a huge step for the industry as a whole, right? Now, when you compare that to the pharmaceutical world, right? Pharmacy and these major pharmas, they put 15% of their annual budget into
Yeah.
R&D for new pharmaceuticals, right? I think the number for the battery industry for new R&D is 1 or less than 1%. And when you just think about that, it equates to almost no new innovation,
Right.
right? But just the fact that Elon did a battery day and people are starting to, start thinking about this, and with the new administration, with Biden coming in, a lot of money is going to go into this. I think that you're going to see the battery rapidly evolve over the next 10 and 20 years. And, we're sitting here talking about, LFP, lithium iron phosphate, and NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt. There are people thinking about solid state batteries, which we're thinking about, which are pure lithium metal anodes. If you have a pure lithium metal anode, you can increase the energy density significantly. So for the people that don't know, in the current lithium-ion batteries, the lithium is deposited into the cathode, and the anode is like a graphite
Graphite,
or a
maybe a little bit of
silicone base.
silicon. Yeah.
And then the first discharge of the battery, the lithium goes across into the anode, and then it goes back and forth for charge and discharge,
Yeah.
right? Um, if you can replace the anode, the silicone or graphite, with a pure lithium metal, you can increase the energy density by an order of magnitude, maybe somewhere from 5 to 10x. And so I think that, while battery evolution will be, incremental step by step, we're going to see some really, really big breakthroughs. Whether that's a solid state lithium metal battery, or the next evolution after that being a lithium sulfur battery, or a lithium air battery. I think that I think, first of all, I think that people want to follow Tesla's lead, and that's obviously a smart thing. If they're thinking about nickel-based cathodes, that's probably smart. What we're working on at EnergyX, I mentioned we're working with Dr. Goodenough and creating a solid-state separator, which is the first piece of a solid-state battery. Then you can enable a lithium metal anode. Is to put that type of battery architecture in a cylindrical cell. So during Battery Day, they introduced the 4680, the
The
larger,
4680 tablets. Yeah.
right, 4680 tablets. Today, everybody is working on pouch cell solid state batteries. But if you could put a solid state architecture into a 46, I mean, half the battle here is the manufacturing. Elon likes to talk a lot about the machine that makes the
Yeah.
machine, right? Uh, and he often talks a lot about how hard the stuff that he does is, and he kind of represented that in one of the Battery Day slides, the bench scale to the lab
Yeah. Yeah.
scale to the pilot scale, right? Each step is so hard to do, and even anybody that's working on it knows that taking something from, I like to think about the way that I've licensed the technology from the university, and taking that to industry is so hard to do, that following in the footsteps of what some of the big like if Elon wants to manufacture the machine that's doing 4680 cells, well, I'm sure as hell not going to try to put my solid state battery into a pouch cell if he's manufacturing billions of these cases of 4680 cells. I'm going to try to adapt to what he's doing for the commercialization
Right.
piece of this, right? So I think that that's kind of how maybe I answered your question, maybe I
No, it
didn't,
was pretty
but
good. So before I have more questions for you, but my impression is you don't have a lot of time left. So
Yeah, I have about 10,
All
10 or
right, so let
15
me
minutes
ask you
left.
this. So going further on this issue about solid state batteries and lithium metal anodes and everything, what it seems to me, and I mentioned that about lithium iron phosphate before, as far as vehicles go, cars go, I think for some other applications like airplanes, energy density matters a lot. But it seems like
Yeah.
the 4680, even the lithium iron phosphate cells are going to be sufficient. And it really comes down to cost more than it does energy density. If you're able to deliver, if they're able to deliver 300 miles of range in a $4,000 battery pack with lithium iron phosphate, and you come along with a $10,000 battery pack that delivers 500 miles of range, but the battery pack costs a lot more. You follow what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Because it has nickel,
Of
because it's
course.
using this advanced technology, because it's harder to manufacture, whatever it is, that, for the purposes of this 2023 compact robotaxi, cost is the big thing. It doesn't need more than
Well,
300 miles of range.
uh, it's price per kilowatt hour. So it's the price per the mile,
Right.
right? So the example you gave, if you have a pack a $4,000 pack that does 300
Yeah.
miles and a 10,000 pack that
500
does
miles or 1,000 miles.
500 miles. Yeah, they're it's all relative. It's all
But,
the
well,
equivalent
but the
price
reason
per
I'm
kilowatt
saying that
hour.
is if your goal is to produce an urban robotaxi, that it's going to drive 300 miles a day, and you're going to have an opportunity in the middle of the day when there's a lull in traffic in volume to charge that battery up, give it another 20 minutes or half hour to charge, you could probably get by with a 200-mile range on that.
Yeah, so I think uh, that you can figure out those numbers, right? I assume that you haven't done those calculations. What is the so you theoretically don't want to have any downtime, right?
Well,
Like,
no. The point is that the traffic volume peaks in a morning rush hour and an late afternoon rush hour, 5, 6 o'clock, and there's a window between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock where you could bring your robo taxis in, the ones that are low. Some of them will have done
yeah,
more
yeah,
than the others. But if you had 300 miles
right.
of range, you don't even need to do this. You're just done for the.
I wonder I wonder how many miles a or maybe not a taxi. Let's just say if you took all the Ubers, like how many miles an Uber travels is an interesting. I bet I wonder if that's
Well,
public.
Uber isn't a good example because the driver needs brakes. The car doesn't. The robo taxi doesn't. But I think it's a good ballpark number that an urban robo taxi, which will probably average around 20 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, when it's operating, and it should be running full time, because until they saturate the market with robo taxis, they'll just be running from 6 a.m. to midnight.
Yeah.
But that they, at an average of 20 miles an hour over 18 hours, it ends up being 360 miles if you do that. But I think the average speed is actually less than that. It's really more like 15 miles an hour in urban environments. So
Right.
300-mile range. The whole point is that if you engineer this really amazing 2023 compact robotaxi, you may be able to get 300 plus miles of range with lithium iron phosphate. And the goal is to keep the cost. And lithium iron phosphate cycles well as well also. So you get good cycle
Right.
life. So you're amortizing the vehicle over more miles, and you just end up with this. I'm getting numbers like 5 cents a mile cost for running the
So
2023.
you
And so the goal is getting the
you
cost down, not getting the energy density up for that application.
right, for that application. So how do you differentiate, like 15 miles an hour or 20 miles per hour to me feels pretty low. Yeah, for urban applications, maybe. I mean, it's certainly an interesting thing to think
But then
about.
you get into like shipping. Like if you want to do a container ship that's going to, I was actually, one of the videos I'm working on is this idea of what if you put battery cells in a container ship? And there it
Yeah.
turns out that the fuel tank on the biggest container ship is 15 million liters. And if you wanted to put an equivalent number of cells in, it would take like 75 million liters to fit all the cells in. And that still wouldn't have enough range.
LFP or of LFP
No,
or of
that's like high
what?
nickel. That's like the high nickel
I know.
cells. So if you were able,
So you
if you were
said
able to,
biggest is 15 million liters, and if you wanted to, it'd be 75. That's
75
what you
million, and it
said.
still wouldn't be as good. So if you
Yeah.
could get to 1,000 watt-hours per liter, like I think the high nickel cells are going to be like 1,000 watt-hours per liter. So if you get to 2,000 watt-hours per liter, you'd be making a real dent. But it's just sort of this interesting challenge of how do you make shipping work? How do you make airplanes work?
Yeah.
Tesla semi needs high energy density because every kilogram of or pound of cells takes away from the pounds of cargo. So it's really important for certain applications to have high energy density. But my opinion, not for urban robo-taxi. So I just think that's a really interesting way to go. But anyway, let me turn to something else that I think you might care more about, which is a lot of my viewers are looking for where else they can invest their money besides Tesla. And I often hear people saying, how do we invest in nickel? How do we invest in lithium? So my impression is that EnergyX is not publicly traded, right?
So we're not publicly traded. However, we uh, we just launched a crowdfunding campaign. So anybody, the general public, can actually buy shares of EnergyX now, which is pretty cool.
So where would they do that? Where would they find this crowdfunding campaign?
Uh, just on our website, you can go to energyx.com. And then in the top right corner, there's an invest button, or energyx.com/invest.
Okay, have there been any funding rounds? Have you done any? I mean, my impression is you funded it, but I,
Yep. I funded it. I put in over $1 million of my own cash. I wanted to follow. I obviously looked at Elon Musk, and he self-funded all of his companies to start, and that's how he was able to maintain so much equity. So I put in $1 million of my own money. Subsequent to that, we've had a few million more of outside private capital come in. And then we just launched this crowdfunding campaign and have raised several $100,000. And I'm in conversations with a few people that are looking to put in many more millions. But now anybody can go on and purchase as little, they can make as little as a $98 investment into
okay, so are
EnergyX.
there, when somebody's going to do an IPO, there's like documents that support. Here's our annual report. What kind of documents would people be able to review to get more of a sense of the company's? Because my impression right now, you're probably not generating much revenue. It's right now you're in the let's build this thing up and get to the point where we can get to revenue, and then after we get to revenue, somewhere down the road we get to profit. But how would people find it? Because what was it? QuantumScape just had this big presentation, which was ripped apart by Limiting Factor and Hyperchange TV. I didn't do my own video on it. I
Yeah.
watched their videos. People have asked me to cover QuantumScape. I'm like, just watch Limiting Factor and Hyperchange. You don't need to hear me. They're projecting
Yeah.
we're going to produce 90 gigawatt hours of batteries in 2028 or something like that. Maybe it was 90 megawatt hours. It was some astonishingly small number of battery cells, like in 2028. Like they're not even going to get to profitability till 2030, and they just did an IPO.
Yeah.
And so these guys, and that was Hyperchange's rip. Limiting Factor was ripping into the technology, saying this doesn't make any sense. And I think the numbers, the energy densities they were talking about achieving are like what Tesla's already, like they had projected they had Tesla or nickel, cobalt, aluminum at like 250 watt hours per kilogram, and they're already 270. And Elon is saying we're already at 320 watt hours per kilogram. He just spoke, I forget, maybe it was a German CEO thing, and he said we're already over 300 watt hours per kilogram, which would be impossible according to QuantumScape slides. So,
Yeah.
but people who want to invest, they want to have more information, quality information. I'm guessing this is not, you haven't filed anything with the SEC, so where would they get?
We actually have
Okay.
for this. So it's called a Reg CF, Reg crowdfunding, and
Oh,
it goes through a platform called Net Capital. And Net Capital is really a pretty cool platform where people can invest into high growth startups like ours. So I mean, investing has fundamentally changed, right? You used to be able to invest in companies that were looking to grow early on, but now these companies stay private for so long because there's so many more avenues of funding. You have venture capital, you have private equity, and then late stage private equity. So these companies stay private for super long. But now with net capital and this crowdfunding regulation through the SEC, people can kind of list their companies like we've done, and you can invest in EnergyX by going on our site, and then it'll take you to net capital. But we did have to file a form with the SEC. And then on our offering page that you'll get to if you go to energyx.com/invest and then net capital, we have our audited financials. We have our full deck and presentation. And you can see our projections. You can see the upside value potential. You can read about our team. You can see all about our technology.
Because I wanted to get there. What's the upside potential?
So
tell me the great story. Tell me the super optimistic story of where EnergyX is going to be in 10 years if all goes well. Recognizing that this is a forward-looking statement, and this is where I hope we get to, and of course, this use your judgment, etc.
Yeah, I mean, if you believe in an electric vehicle future, and you believe that they're going to be, I mean, look, this past year there were about 2 million electric vehicles made. And Tesla is worth nearly $600 billion, right? If you believe that in 10 years there's going to be 10 to 20 million electric vehicles per year, yeah, right, exactly, then we're going to need millions and millions and millions of tons of lithium to be able to do that. And at that point, if EnergyX is making a fraction between $500 and $1,000 per ton of lithium, then you're looking at billions of dollars of recurring revenue, and we'll be a multi-billion-dollar company.
Growing, and it'll be growing because we'll still be producing more.
Yeah. It all, if you're a believer in an electric vehicle future and a sustainable energy future, then there needs to be a lot of lithium to be able to do that, because energy storage is, first of all, essential for electric mobility, but then it's key for a sustainable energy, like domestically, right? Because the renewable energy sources are intermittent, whether it's the sun, which is only during the day, or wind. You need energy storage backup, and lithium is the common, we've spent a lot of time on this call talking about the different types of batteries, whether that's LFP or NMC, but in every single battery chemistry, lithium is a common denominator. Right. It's in every single one. So lithium is a huge part of the renewable energy future. And, we have essentially created the equivalent of fracking for the oil industry. So in the beginning, they would just drill one hole down and oil would be popping up, right? And that created X amount of oil, right? And then as society evolved, we realized that we needed 10x oil. So how do we get from X to 10x? Well, instead of just going down, they went down and out. And that's what fracking is, right? And nobody owns fracking. But if somebody did own fracking, it might be the most valuable company in the world, because they could take $5 or $10 per barrel of oil for Exxon, Aramco, anybody that used fracking would have to pay them. That's what we've created for lithium. Right now, they produce X. We're going to need 10X. And in order to bridge that gap, every single lithium company is going to need to use our technology.
Okay. All right, you got somewhere you got to get to. I want to thank you very much for coming on my channel. I want to suggest to you that you reach out to the Limiting Factor channel to talk about the chemistry issues, and you reach out to Hyperchange to talk about the bright and promising future and the risks and all that stuff, because those are two channels I love to watch, and I think you'd be a good fit for both of those channels. So
cool, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you very much for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Talk soon. Bye.
So, folks, I'm still here. Let me see if I can. I'm still here. You haven't lost me yet. I'm really glad that I got this. We did this interview. That was fun. So EnergyX sounds like a caffeine drink. So I thought that was a really good interview. I was very impressed with him. I think this is a really interesting technology. I'd like to see where this goes. I think there's a challenge for EnergyX, which is if Tesla's able to produce its own lithium, then maybe they don't need EnergyX. On the other hand, Teague Egan seems like a very firm believer in what his company's doing, and that his technology, the technology they're using, which they use membranes to process whatever you've got lithium in, they can use these membranes to get lithium out at less cost and more effectively without losing as much lithium. A lot of the, when I watch some of his other, if you go on YouTube and you search for his name, you will see some other videos where he goes into more depth on this stuff. And one of the problems is in certain technologies, they lose like 30% of the lithium the way that they try to extract it. So the technology that he's talking about makes a big difference, can get things going a lot better. So I can't think of anything. I'm really glad. Thank you. Thanks everybody for watching. By the way, I'm wearing the Elon Be Less Wrong t-shirt. There should be a link in the description below to the t-shirts, and please support this channel on Patreon and join the YouTube channel. I tried this. I don't think it worked. I tried setting the chat for only channel members, and I guess we don't have that many channel members, so the chat was pretty much dead. So I won't do that again. Next time I will leave the chat open. I don't know how to fix it right now. So next time I will leave the chat open so anyone can chat. I'm just trying different things. Yeah, Mark, lithium can almost be completely recycled. The problem is that there isn't enough batteries right now that are being taken offline to be able to be recycled, to recycle enough lithium out to be able to use the lithium. The battery industry is growing so fast that even if you took the old batteries and recycled them, you wouldn't get that much lithium out. 10 years from now, even 10 years from now, there won't be enough batteries ready to be recycled yet. It's probably 10, 15 years out that you will have enough batteries coming in that could be recycled to generate a meaningful amount of lithium and nickel and manganese or whatever materials you want to get out of the cells to go back into new cells. That's the problem with recycling. It's a good idea and it'll matter in the future, but it doesn't. There's not enough lithium-ion cells out there now. Oh, hi, John. Hi, Jim. Thanks for coming on. So we just did, for summary, I just spoke with Teague Egan. He is the CEO of EnergyX. Yes, EnergyX's name is inspired by SpaceX. It's like energy exploration technologies, mimicking space exploration technology, SpaceX. He's a fan of Elon Musk. He owns a Tesla. He loves electric vehicles. Now, I can't know, is his technology real? How valuable is this technology? How likely is this to succeed? It looks good. I think it would be great if the limiting factor is a channel. If you guys don't know, the limiting factor is my favorite channel on YouTube, and he goes in depth on these chemistry issues. And I'm not sophisticated enough to know whether the interview I just had, how genuine is, how accurate he is, or whether he's full of it. I don't know. He sounds good to me, but I'm not sophisticated enough to judge that. So I would love to see him on limiting factor. And then in terms of the money, how does this translate to money, 5, 10 years from now, if you were thinking of investing in this company? I don't know enough I haven't looked at the documents yet. What are the prospects for this company to succeed? And, if Tesla's going to generate its own lithium out of clay deposits in Nevada, maybe they don't need them. But if he's able to deliver a way of getting the lithium out that saves money and ultimately reduces the cost per kilowatt hour of a battery cell, that's a huge deal. I don't think Tesla's buying a nickel mine yet. I think Tesla is working with a lot of miners. I think that Elon didn't want to. I don't think he wants to buy a nickel mine. I don't think he wants to get in the mining business. I think he wants to. I think the practical reality is this: the material is in the ground, and you just have to motivate the miners to say, if you mine it, there will be a market for it. We will buy it. And I think Tesla is basically taking the position. They're talking to miners and saying, we will sign a long-term contract with you now to buy all the nickel you can mine. We will sign a long-term contract with you to mine all the manganese, all the lithium, whatever it is. There's actually, I heard a theory that the Battery Day claim about lithium, about the lithium clays in Nevada, was one theory is that was just a posturing thing to try to drive down the price of lithium from lithium suppliers. I don't know. I was hoping to get more into how Tesla is going to successfully convert the clays in Nevada into lithium, how they were going to extract the lithium out. I don't think Elon and Drew would make that up. I think they're onto something, but is it something that they can scale? We don't know whether they're at a lab scale, whether they're at a bench scale, whether they're at a pilot scale. We don't know the answer to that question. Well, Jim, I agree that mining is an environmental nightmare getting permits, but a lot of the mining is going to happen in Australia. It's going to happen in Indonesia. It's going to happen in Canada, which is none of that's going to be affected by the President of the United States. Newmont Graphite wants to work with Tesla. I'm not familiar with Newmont Graphite. It sounds like New World Graphite, but my impression is that nickel is the hardest substance to get. That lithium is not that hard to get. Iron phosphate batteries is easy to get. Phosphate's easy to get. And for people who didn't get this, one of the things that I'm obsessed about when I think about all this battery technology is how much of future batteries, let's say we go out to 2030 and let's say the world is producing 20 terawatt hours of lithium-ion batteries for grid storage, for electric vehicles, etc. Tesla's going to produce 3 terawatt hours of high nickel batteries, and Tesla suppliers may be producing another 3 terawatt hours of nickel manganese and iron phosphate batteries. But of the 20 terawatt hours produced in 2030, my theory is that 80% of that will be iron phosphate, that all grid storage will be iron phosphate. It's costs less. The material is an infinite supply, effectively infinite supply. So I think it's strange because I think iron phosphate is the future. Teague Egan, who I just spoke with, was talking about coming up with advanced battery technologies like lithium metal anodes, lithium air, I think he said. The solids, whenever I see people talking about solid state batteries or these, more advanced battery technologies that can deliver 500 watt hours per kilogram, 1,000 watt hours per kilogram, it really comes down to cost. Cost is the most important thing. And that's the thing about iron phosphate cells is they're really, really inexpensive. And nickel producers won't expand production for 2 years. This is Jim Whitehead. He said they will force prices to double or more to get money to expand. Yeah, I think there's going to be a challenge getting nickel producers to expand. But so my take on this is, if you think about Tesla producing 3 terawatt hours of high nickel batteries that are doing 400 watt hours per kilogram, my question is, what applications do those go into? So the compact robotaxi that they talked about on Battery Day, the 2023 robotaxi that's going to be smaller than a Model 3, that's going to use iron phosphate, and that is going to be the dominant vehicle. If it's not, I actually think maybe we'll see an even smaller vehicle in, say, 2026 or 2027. But the future robotaxis, urban robotaxis, long-distance robotaxis will be much less common, and they will need longer range. But urban robotaxis just don't need the range. So iron phosphate should dominate there, and iron phosphate should dominate in grid storage, in power walls, in megapacks, and power packs. There's no reason to use nickel-based chemistries in places where you're not worried about volume or mass. So, and it's very clear that Megapack is going to be running on iron phosphate. I think Powerwall should run on iron phosphate, although in the Tesla Battery Day presentation, it looked like iron phosphate was going to run on nickel manganese or nickel manganese cobalt, nickel cobalt aluminum. I guess for a home perspective, for some people, like my house, I have a big garage. You could double the size of the Powerwall, and I could stick Powerwalls in there, and I wouldn't care. Because I have a 3-car garage and we don't use the third garage. We just store junk in there, and we have plenty of room. Unlike friends of mine who fill all three of their garage spots with junk, and they park their cars in the driveway. I think a Tesla is a single-seat pod car. But so to me, all grid storage should go to iron phosphate just because it's less expensive. So for solid state to matter, for lithium metal to matter, for whatever advanced battery technology somebody's talking about to matter at scale, you'd have to get the cost down below significantly, at least close to iron phosphate. And iron phosphate, everything I'm seeing, iron phosphate is like half the cost per kilowatt hour of nickel-based chemistries. The material is just so cheap. So I think that's a really interesting question going forward that maybe I need to do a video on this. I can't see, like Tesla Semi, That's going to use high nickel batteries. So let's say you get to 400 watt hours per kilogram in 2024 with the 4680 cell, tabless cell. That's going to go in Tesla Semi. Tesla Semi needs all the energy density it can get, because every kilogram you save, every pound you save in battery weight is a pound you can add in cargo, because they have a maximum cargo of 80,000 pounds in the US, 40,000 kilograms, I think, in Europe, which is 88,000 pounds. So the lighter you can make the battery pack, the more cargo you can carry. So it makes huge sense for Tesla Semi to have high energy density. I was looking at shipping. If you didn't catch it earlier in the video, I was talking about shipping. I'm thinking about doing a video about container ships. The largest container ship in the world is the OOCL Hong Kong, and it has a tank for heavy fuel oil diesel that's 15 million liters. And I worked out, okay, at 400 watt hours, at 700 watt hours, or I think it was at 1,000 watt hours per liter, which is better than the best battery cells that Tesla's using. It's at 1,000 watt hours per liter. The sufficient number of batteries in order to power the same ship to provide the same energy that the 15 million liters of fuel oil provides, you would need like 75 million or more liters. So it would take up 5 times as much space or 8 times as much space in the ship. Now, I'm not sure how much that matters. What that means is the cargo ship, which carries like 600 million liters of cargo, so it goes down to 550 million liters of cargo. If the cost of operating the ship drops dramatically because you're using and the battery cells don't cost that much, by the way. They don't have, it's not that they cost a lot, it's just that they take up a lot of room. So if you lose 50 million liters of cargo, but you're saving 50% on the trip, you know, if your cost of operating the ship, because these diesel engines are very, very difficult to maintain, they're expensive. Not to mention the pollution, which, you know, if they start taxing the pollution of these heavy fuel oil ships, that could make a big difference too. So I could see a future of these battery cells going into these big container ships, which is probably the biggest use and the biggest polluter. But you know, if you can deliver much higher energy density at reasonable cost, then you'd be able to squeeze more cargo onto the ship, and that would make the shipping better. Tesla van will probably use LFP. I think that's correct. I think I have a video, Cybervan. I don't have the shirt on, but I have a video about Cybervan. I definitely think it makes sense that Tesla would use liquid lithium iron phosphate in. If the van, and I should say, Mark, if the van is doing urban transit, I think if you're doing long distance transit, if you're picturing this van is going 150 miles an hour and it's going from Miami to Tampa, or it's going from New York to Washington, D.C., or from LA to San Francisco, and it's going a longer distance, I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of room. To me, there's a lot of room under my design for the Cybervan or the Tesla van, Tesla minibus, whatever. There is a lot of room in there. You could squeeze a lot of minibus cells in there, a lot of iron phosphate cells in there. But it might make sense to use nickel cells for that if you're planning on using it for distance travel. And I'm picturing, like, here I am in South Florida, in Boca Raton, Florida. A lot of people love to go to Disney in Orlando. It's a 3-hour drive. It's like 150, 200 miles, something like that. If you could hop in a van that would take you there, and you're talking about the cost, round trip cost to go to Disney would be like $5 a person. It's like shocking how low the cost is per mile on the Tesla minibus. If you squeeze 20 people in there, 30 people is even better, but if you squeeze 20 people in there and it's going, you know, its cost per mile is 10 cents a mile, so it goes 300 miles round trip, 10 cents a mile, it costs $30 for the trip, and you spread that across 20 people, it's like, it's stunning how cheap that is. LFP batteries, Life batteries, yeah, Life LF. I think it's LIFEPO4 is the number that I see people using. Yeah, lithium iron batteries. Yeah, that would be a good way of doing it, Jim. All right, so great interview with Teague Egan. I'm still working, by the way. Technology speaking, I have this right now. I'm on my MacBook, which I used to use before. I had switched over to my Windows machine as my plan for what I was going to do, and I cannot get my Windows machine to work with Skype and OBS to make this work, and it's very, very frustrating. I had it set up. It was working earlier today. My wife was on Skype with me, and she's downstairs. I had it all working, and all of a sudden it stopped working. Very, very frustrating. I was hoping to get this working, and I couldn't hear him. So I switched over to my MacBook, and I think for the future I'm just going to do the interviews on my MacBook because I just don't see a better way. So let's see, high nickel for heavy hauling and long distance. Yes, high nickel for heavy hauling and long distance, absolutely. I think but the problem, Mark, is that market just isn't that big. The market for Tesla the Class 8 trucks, I think there's 250,000 a year sold in North America. I think the chat is visible to non-insiders, Jim. I think they can't type. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I believe they can see it. They just can't comment. But I'm not going to do this again. I think this doing the chat for channel members only. I was thinking it would be more orderly. There just aren't enough members to make it work. So I keep experimenting. I'm sorry for the people who wanted to participate in the chat. I didn't realize that it was going to work out like this, or maybe I should have promoted the memberships more to make it work. So, but yeah, I think that the problem with the high nickel chemistry that Tesla is talking about, that Elon and Drew talked about, is if they're going to make 3 terawatt hours of those cells, where are they going to use them? Because in the Battery Day presentation, they were using them for Tesla Semi and Cybertruck. And that's just not enough volume to use 3 terawatt hours of high nickel cells. I don't know. I don't know if they can see it or not. Hey, if you're watching this and you're not chipping in on the chat, please comment to tell us whether you can see the chat. There is a live chat that I experimented with. I set it for YouTube channel members only as an experiment that I will not be repeating. I apologize if you don't like it. But if you are watching this video right now and you do not see that, you either do see the chat or you don't see the chat. If you see the chat, there are comments by Mark Plott and Jim Whitehead. If you see those chat comments, please comment on the video saying, yes, I see the chat. And if you don't see it, please comment, no, I don't see the chat. And that way we'll know how that worked. But regardless, we're not going to do this again. So Jim was asking about, I just have this point that the idea of high nickel cells, even nickel manganese cells to some extent, but high nickel cells in particular, getting to 400 watt hours per kilogram, I don't see that that's necessary or valuable in large extent. The compact robotaxis and the grid storage will always be better off with iron phosphate cells because of the cost savings. YouTube is making lots of changes after the election, creating all kinds of problems. This isn't YouTube doing this. This is me. I decided to try an alternative where the chat would be restricted to channel members only. And apparently I restricted it too much, or there just aren't enough channel members, so the chat ends up being just you two guys. There was somebody else who was on the chat at the very beginning. Bob, I think, was his name. So that didn't work. But so, I have issues with YouTube, but, YouTube isn't making my life that much worse. And I'm very happy with YouTube. I have concerns about their censorship and all that stuff, but they're not creating problems for me personally. Not significantly. I have one whine about how they affected my monetization, but that's not political. That's something else. So, yeah, I just think that's the big question. If you made 3 terawatt hours of high nickel cells in 2030 that got 400 watt hours per kilogram or better, what would you do with them? Where would those cells go? And I think like airplanes, for Elon's dream, I think Elon was talking in the German CEO conversation, I think it was, about if we can get to 450 watt hours per kilogram, it doubles the range of an electric jet. If we can get to 480 watt hours, getting up to 500 watt hours per kilogram matters for air travel. I think it matters for shipping. I think there are certain applications where it matters more than others. But those are low volume applications. I'm not sure. Maybe Hyperloop is really going to be better off with the high. That makes sense to me. That you wouldn't want to accelerate all that mass. The less mass you have to accelerate, the more efficient Hyperloop's going to be. So I could see that, but I think that's a real challenge. That's my biggest struggle with Battery Day and the 3 terawatt hours of high nickel cells. When I worked out the numbers of where are you going to use that, you can't make enough roadsters. Not enough people can afford a $200,000 roadster to make that work. Airplanes, boats, sports cars. Yeah, but they're just, you can't make enough sports cars. And the ships, I think certain kinds of shipping needs it. I think a lot of kinds of boats would not need the high nickel cells. LFP for robotaxi, short trips around 300 miles, but this is Mark Plot. NCA, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, nickel, cobalt, manganese, mid nickel for long distance, but not towing. Yeah, I definitely think like Cybertruck, if it's going to tow, I could see vehicles they're going to tow are going to want higher energy density. Although there's a trade-off there. I've seen people say that you want your vehicle to weigh more if you're towing a large load. Like my theory is Cybertruck's going to be lighter than everybody thinks. And even with iron phosphate cells, the exoskeleton construction combined with structural pack, that thing's going to be light. I think the dual motor Cybertruck is going to be lighter than a Tesla Model S. And I think like the current Tesla Model S, I think the next Model S that's going to be next year is going to be lighter still. But all right, so I think we're starting to lose viewers, and I'm starting to lose steam. So again, check out the shirts. Please support this channel on Patreon. Please join as a channel member if you prefer that. I prefer Patreon if you have an option. Please buy the shirts. Please, smash the like button, say thumbs up to the video. I don't know if it matters. Tell your friends to watch this. Subscribe. Hey, listen, thank everybody for watching. I really appreciate this, and we'll do this again. Some real-wheel drive Cybertruck will be... No, it's not going to be 7,000 pounds. Are you kidding, Mark? Are you kidding? No way. It's not going to be 7,000 pounds towing or 7,000 pounds curb weight. What are you saying there, Mark? Where are you getting 7,000 pounds for a Cybertruck? Rear-wheel drive. That's going to be light. It's going to have only one motor. It's going to have a smaller battery pack. Rear-wheel drive Cybertruck's going to weigh 4,000 pounds. Curb weight. Maybe it'll tow 7,000 pounds, but it's only going to weigh 4,000 pounds. And, Google's set of aircraft in 2018, worldwide deliveries increased to 2,441, while U.S. output was 1,746. That's current, Jim. That's current aircraft production. So this is one of I have a video, if you haven't seen it, I have a video of 10 industries that Tesla is going to destroy, or 10 industries that Elon Musk and Tesla are going to destroy, robotaxi going to destroy. Short-haul air travel is going to go away because robotaxi is going to be easier. You're going to be 100-mile-an-hour robotaxi going through a loop tunnel from, like right now, people fly from Miami to Tampa. They're going to take a robotaxi instead. It's going to be easier and cheaper. It's going to be so insane how cheap it is to travel by loop. The Tesla minibus going in a loop tunnel. It's going to be insanely cheap to travel that way. The cost per mile is going to be 10 cents a mile. You do 300 miles, it's going to be $30 for the vehicle, and you put 20 people in it. It's $1.50 a piece to go from Miami to Tampa. And all right, you make a huge markup and you charge them $5. I mean, just seriously, wrap your head around this. This is insane. The cost of operating that Tesla minibus, even if it's 20 cents a mile, which I think it's not going to be. I think it's going to be cheaper than, even if it's 20 cents a mile to operate that thing. And you do 300 miles, what is that, $60? You got 20 people and there's $3 a piece. How is an airplane going to compete with that? It's not going to be able to compete with that. It's insane how cost effective this robotaxi electric vehicle world is going to be. And so that's the short haul. Then you get to the medium distance, going from Miami to Atlanta. Yeah, no, I hate driving long drive. I'm so ready to have self-driving. Like, I'm getting a Cybertruck at the end of 2021, I think. Though I'm going to be one of the first ones with a Cybertruck. And I ordered full self-driving. And I've had moments where I was driving on a long drive and it's like, oh, I wish knowing what I know about full self-driving, I was like, oh, I wish I could turn that on. I am dying for that. But the short haul trips are going to be really cheap. Then you get to the medium distance trips of, let's say, Miami to Atlanta or New York to Chicago. And then you have Hyperloop. And Elon was talking about Hyperloop's going to be supersonic. It's going to be faster than air travel. And it's going to be cheaper. So I think, and then you have the really, really long haul trips, and SpaceX Starship point-to-point travel is going to replace long haul air. I don't know what room there is left for airplanes in a world where you have point-to-point travel from New York to Shanghai. Yeah, I ordered a dual motor also, and I ordered it with full self-driving. But you've got, let's say, Los Angeles to Shanghai is going to be that's probably going to be on a single stage. Like New York to London is going to be on a single stage. Starship. It's not even going to need the Super Heavy. And it's going to get there in an hour and a half hour. What airplane is going to compete with that? You know, it's so I think the market for air travel, just the market for airplanes disappears. Yeah, no, I mean, and I was even thinking like cargo. Like, could Hyperloop do North America to Europe? Could Hyperloop do North America to Asia? And like, let's do Asia, because I think that's an easier one for me. I'm not sure, I don't know, I feel like I don't know as much about the North Atlantic, but if you just run under the west coast of the United States and you go under the Bering Strait, you know, you don't have to go under a whole lot of water to get over to Asia. Then you could run a Hyperloop or a loop or multiple ones going from North America and even South America, coming up to North America, over to Asia. And, you know, I think that would be faster than shipping. I think it might cost less than shipping. I think you could have this radical change in travel, especially imagine if you had like a supersonic Hyperloop going from Los Angeles up through Alaska and back down to Tokyo or Shanghai or something like that. That's not going to be as fast as Starship point to point, but it probably costs less. I don't think lava is an issue, and I don't think Hyperloop could get to Hawaii. I think the middle of the Pacific wouldn't work, because I think your tunnel at some point needs to have an air hole to go up to the surface. And I don't think you can go directly under the ocean, but I think you could go along the edge of the oceans on land and, you know, have some stretches where you're underwater, as long as they're not too far. I'm not sure how far you could go underwater before it would create a potential problem. Maybe it's not a problem, and, you know, maybe you go straight across. But I think if you go over the top, you know, instead of going straight across the ocean, if you go over the top, you know, you're adding, you know, 20 or 30% more miles, but you've made it a lot easier to do the tunneling, and it's, you know, it's not that much further. You know, it depends on where you're going from. If you're going from New York to London, or New York to Paris, it's not that big of a deal. If you're going from Miami to Rome, well, you're going a lot further out of the way that way. But I don't think Hawaii would. Oh, between the islands, I don't think lava's. I don't know that. I suspect you could do tunnels in Hawaii. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure where. I think the lava might be restricted to under the volcanoes, and I don't think there's that many volcanoes. I'm not sure about that. I don't know enough about that. It's an interesting question. Maybe Hawaii is a special case and it wouldn't work. I mean, Japan has volcanoes and they have a lot of tunnels. You know, Pacific Rim of Fire, right? All right. I've gone way too long. Again, please support the channel on Patreon. Check out the shirts and the links below. Mark and Jim, thank you very much for coming on the chat and chipping in and talking. I really appreciate you guys helping out with the channel. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm gonna call it a night and move on. This was great, and check out EnergyX. I really appreciate Teague Egan coming on the channel. Thanks everyone.